Welcome to this episode of Dr. Ambedkar Thoughts. In our last video, we have discussed opponents of reservation argue that caste is irrelevant in modern India. So government should do away with caste-based reservation. With the help of major survey and study reports of last 25 years, we proved that caste is very much in the air in modern India, not only in villages but also in urban places. There is one more myth about reservation, that this policy is only in India and no other country in the world have such discriminatory policy. Reservation policy is only in India. About 25% of the countries of the world have adopted this policy. The table in front of you shows the names of the countries from all 6 continents of the world where affirmative action has been adopted in the field of higher education. The graph in front of you shows the percentage of countries in every continent which have adopted affirmative action as a national policy. 34% European nations, 21.7% of North American nations, 21.4% of Oceanic nations, which includes nations like Australia and New Zealand, 20.4% of Asian nations, 16.7% of South American nations, 16.7% of African nations have adopted the policy of affirmative action. Different countries have used different names for reservation. In America, it is termed as affirmative action. In Europe, it is called positive action or positive discrimination. In Canada, it is called an employment equity. In India, it is called reservation. In the international law, it is termed as special measures. Now we will see what different countries under this policy are offering. First, in America, it is termed as affirmative action policy, which is observed in both education as well as employment field. In America, affirmative action policy was adopted through executive order of President Kennedy in 1961, which was later modified by President Johnson's executive order in 1965. Under this policy, 2 classes of people are protected. First, gender, and second, ethnicity. Ethnicity is based on the race and culture. 4 groups are protected on the basis of ethnicity. These are African American, Hispanic American, Asian American, and Native American. After America adopted affirmative action policy, many countries in the world also adopted similar policies. Second, Australia. Affirmative action in Australia is based on gender, ethnicity and class. In 1986, Australia passed an act which was called Equal Employment Opportunity for Women Act. Under this act, programs were initiated to provide improved access to women's employment opportunities. Australia also adopted special measures based on international law. Under the special measures, program for indigenous employment is recognized. Under this, the employment agencies are allowed to restrict certain number of vacancies for the aboriginals and residents of Torres Strait Island. Third, in case of Brazil, the 2000 census showed that Afro-Brazilians were disproportionately represented among the lowest income basket and only half of Afro-Brazilians likely to attend university. In 2001, Brazil adopted first affirmative action policy in government hiring, set aside 20% new jobs for the Afro-Brazilians. In 2003, Rio State University adopted quota system. In 2005, affirmative action policy was implemented in private sector. Quotas are mandatory in all Brazil's 69 federal universities. In 2012, Brazil passed law under which 12% of federal jobs are secured for black applicants. Now we will see the case of China. In China, there are preferential policies for ethnic minority. For example, China's southwestern Yunnan province, where minorities are 34% of the population, there are about 150 different preferential policies. Minorities receive proportional representation in local government. Minority students applying universities receive bonus points on national higher education entrance exam. Chinese government encourages business to hire minorities and offer no interest loans to business undertaken by minorities. Prominent government posts may be filled by model citizens who are also from minorities. There are preferences for family planning, exemption from minimum marriage age and one child stricture. In the field of education, preferential admissions, lowered school fees, boarding school, remedial programs. In the field of employment and promotions, ethnic minorities are given special consideration. In the business, also they are given preferential treatment. Now we will see the case of Canada. In Canada, affirmative action is known as employment equity. Employment equity, which affects aboriginals and minorities. Affirmative action policy in Canada requires employers in federally regulated industries to give preferential treatment to 4 designated groups: women, people with disabilities, aboriginals people, and visible minorities. Visible minority is defined as non-Caucasian in race and non-white color. The Act requires that employers remove barriers to employment of the 4 designated groups. Employers also require to continue on positive policies for hiring, training, retention and promotion of members of designated groups. Now we will take the case of Finland. In certain education programs, including legal and medical education, there are quotas for Swedish speaking applicants. In addition to these linguistic quotas, women may get preferential treatment in recruitment in certain public sector jobs if there is a gender imbalance in the field. Men and women have equal qualifications. Women have to be preferred for a job. Moreover, disabled should be preferred to non-disabled people for job. In case of France, some selective institutions have increased students of color by targeting neighborhood or particular schools located in priority education areas. Areas are classified as zones, priority education zones, based on several criteria, including high percentage of immigrant students for whom French is second language, students performing below grade level, and low income students. Students from these zones are eligible to compete to be part of special admissions programs which are designed to give them greater access to selective higher education. Let us take the case of Germany. In Germany, affirmative action is called positive discrimination. There are programs stating that if men and women have equal qualifications, women have to be preferred for a job. Moreover, the disabled should be preferred to non-disabled people. This is typical for all positions in the state and university service. Let us take the case of Israel. Israel has class-based affirmative action. It takes into account whether an applicant is from poor neighborhood or high school, but not their race or ethnicity. In case of Japan, since last 40 years there is an affirmative action policy for Burakin people in Japan, who were traditionally considered as outcasts. The program to inculcate measures to ameliorate Burakin housing stock, road and sewage infrastructure and health and education facilities, all of which were substandard in 1950 and 60. They also include measures to promote the social inclusion of Burakin through education related initiatives such as improved teacher-student ratio, dispatch of support staff, as well as work related initiatives such as preferential hiring by local municipalities and large corporations. In case of Norway, all public stock companies, either gender should be represented by 40%. Norway requires 40% of PCL boards to be women. New Zealand has affirmative action policy for Maoris and Polynesian. Individuals from Maori or Polynesian descents are afforded improved access to university courses. We shall consider our neighbor Pakistan. Pakistan has quota system on regional basis. It was established to give every region of the country representation in institutions according to their population. Civil services in Pakistan has reserved 92.5% of its seats. Only 7.5% selected on the basis of merit. For Punjab province it is 50%. For Sindh it is 19%, which is further divided into 40% for urban areas, rest of the seats for rural areas of Sindh province. Northwest Frontier Province 11.5%, Baluchistan 6%, northeastern areas and federally administered tribal areas 4%, Azad Kashmir 2%. For women it is 10% share. Now let us see what Nelson Mandela has done for South Africa. South Africa has employment equity. South Africa has most comprehensive affirmative action policy. When Mandela Commission agitation was at its peak, Nelson Mandela was visiting India. He was influenced by reservation policy in India. The policy under Employment Equity Act in South Africa ensures that designated community like blacks, women and disabled are afforded equal representation in jobs. Under this, it is compulsory for employers to prepare action plan which ensures due representation of designated community. For example, if board of directors consists of 50 members, its composition must have 35 blacks, 5 colored, 4 Indians and 5 whites. In this, it is mandatory to have 25 women directors and 2 disabled persons. This policy is binding on employers employing more than 50 workers. The policy covers all municipalities and different organs of the state, including those who have business dealings with the government. We will discuss South Africa's case in greater details in our later video. South Korea has affirmative action for Chinese and North Korean. In case of our next neighbor, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka government policy of standardization in essence was an affirmative action scheme to assist geographically disadvantaged students to gain tertiary education. In 1977, Sri Lanka introduced different standardization policy based on merits and district quotas. 80% of the university places were filled in accordance with raw marks scored by students. The remaining 20% of places was allocated to students in districts with inadequate education facilities. Romania has quota for Romans. Romani people or Roma or Gypsies people are allotted quotas for access to public school and state university. Romani have scholarship earmarked especially for them. Macedonia has quotas for Albanians. Now we will take very important case of affirmative action in Malaysia. Malaysia has Malaysian economic policy. Malaysia has NEP or National Economic Policy, which is considered as most developed racial affirmative action policy in the world. This policy aims at establishing balance in control of economic resources which was controlled by one particular community. The results of NEP are miraculous, which were achieved in very short span of time. In our next video, we will discuss this policy in greater details and we will also see how Malaysia knowingly or unknowingly adopted Dr. Ambedkar's thoughts on socialism and achieved great results. South Korea has affirmative action policy for Chinese and Korean. Now let us see the case of United Kingdom. United Kingdom has Equality Act 2010. Under Equality Act of 2010, positive action plan is aimed at recruitment and promotions. Under this policy, the employers are allowed to select candidates as a member of his workforce who belong to a particular social community like women or ethnic minority who are inadequately represented in his workforce. As told earlier, in our next video, we shall discuss in detail the success of affirmative action policy in Malaysia and its relation to Dr. Ambedkar thoughts. Jai Bhim.